Learning outcomes. After studying this module, you shall be able to comment on evolution and the process of natural selection, define the premises of evolutionary psychology, learn about the empirical testing of evolutionary learning. Introduction. Evolutionary success has been proved to be very critical for us humans. You are at this moment reading this module on evolutionary psychology because your ancestors managed to survive. Had they not, we would not have been here in the current picture. Survival, or in simpler words, overcoming the hardships and challenges of the natural habitat we live in, is one of the key aspects that Earth sustains life. The vast ecodiversity as we see today is a result of long, ever continuing process called evolution. As mentioned earlier, in order to evolve, one must be able to survive. In addition, they must be able to procreate or reproduce. It is kind of like a circular loop wherein survival till the reproductive age further leads to production of one of its own kind that further strengthens the possibilities of surviving. Natural selection. Charles Darwin proposed the theory of natural selection in his famous book Origin of Species in 1895. It was not an experimental endeavor of some kind. He very closely observed the species and found that organisms produced a lot many offsprings than could possibly survive. He reasoned that changes in the variants that allow an organism to reproduce more would lead to more descendants. Therefore, the descendants would inherit those traits that helped their ancestors to survive. In a way, those traits or genes that helped in survival are naturally selected, and those that cause a barrier to survival are weeded out. Natural selection, therefore, results in slow gradual changes in species over time. The successful genes spread out throughout the gene pool, replacing the unsuccessful ones. Darwin focused on hostile forces of nature, the events that impede survival. These can be food shortages, environmental calamities, parasites, diseases or predators. So, as he suggested, the organisms would successfully survive the situation if it develops traits that would help it overcome the harshness. For example, if there is food shortage, the animal would probably look out for food that it can preserve for long, like fats and sugars. These patterns resulting from long-term repeated processes of natural selection are called adaptations. However, there were many anomalies in his theory, like a peacock evolving his beautiful and colorful plumage that would attract his predators. So, he revised his theory and gave a theory of sexual selection that is discussed below. Sexual selection. Darwin's answer to the peacock's shiny plumage was that it helped him in mating success by attracting the peahen. Therefore, as suggested by him, the evolution of characteristics is determined because of their mating or sexual benefits rather than mere survival benefits. This is known as sexual selection. Sexual selection, according to Darwin, takes two forms: intersexual competition and intrasexual competition. The former involves members of the same sex competing for a mate. Usually, one with better traits like attractiveness, intelligence or strength wins the game. In the other kind of sexual selection, that is the intersexual competition, the members of one sex choose as a mate based on preferences of qualities in them. These characteristics evolve because the animals that possess them are often chosen as mates and therefore their genes survive. There is a peahen's preference for a colorful peacock might be constructed as a sign for better sexual health. Products of evolutionary process. Genes are packets of DNA that are inherited by children from their parents. All living beings on this planet are products of evolutionary success due to inheritance of healthy genes. The evolutionary process acts like a series of filters, allowing only a subset of genes to pass through. Adaptations are the primary products of a selective process. It can be defined as a reliably developing structure in an organism, which, because it enmeshes with the current structure of the world, cause the solution to the adaptive problems. Adaptations may include preferences for sweet and fatty foods. If one looks closely at the definition, it would be better comprehended that adaptation is not standing against the environment. Environments are always needed for the adaptations to take place. So, if ability of vision is a successful evolutionary product, that does not mean there cannot be blind offsprings. This blindness can be a result due to the immediate effects of surrounding has on the living creatures. Therefore, adaptation is not genetic determinism. Secondly, adaptations are selected and shaped by the environment. Byproducts of adaptation and evolution also leads to products that are not necessarily adaptations. For example, nose was definitely developed to enhance the sense of odor and smelling, but it also helps in holding reading glasses. Thus, it is a kind of byproduct. Nose or random variants. Evolutionary processes often result in random variants that are often neutral in respect to selection. These can be caused by sudden mutations. If these do not cause hindrance in the survival of the species, they are perpetuated over generations. Evolutionary psychology. We now turn to the question that interests us psychologists the most. What are the contributions of the evolutionary processes that set apart human beings from the rest forms of life? Human beings are probably the most refined living creatures surviving on this planet. Often, we distinguish our race with others based on our psychological and emotional abilities such as thinking or language. The basic principles of evolution as defined by Darwin and others are applied to understand the biological sustenance of life. Evolutionary psychologists in addition are curious to examine the effects evolution with the human perspective. Premises of evolutionary psychology. Evolutionary psychology involves three key premises: domain specificity, numerousness and functionality. Domain specificity. Adaptations are domain specific, that is, they are involved to address a particular adaptive problem. For example, in case of food selection, if organisms go by the rule eat everything you see first, it would be maladaptive, as without proper judgment the food can be poisonous and kill the animal. One of the logical explanations of domain specificity is that each environmental situation calls for different solutions, and thus there cannot be a generalized pattern of adaptation. Numerousness. This premise of evolutionary psychology can be very well articulated from the Disney movies called Finding Nemo. The protagonist is one of the survivals of numerous offsprings that could have lasted into adulthood, but got destroyed because of the predators. Numerousness increases the probability of continuing, and often in evolutionary psychology it is referred to as numerous mechanism we have developed that have guided our pathway throughout. Biologically, we have a heart to pump blood or lungs to circulate air within that enables to be a terrestrial organism. Psychologically, as well as the evolutionary processes have done their work, and thus we see many kinds phobias that exist. Most commonly, fear of snakes or reptiles. Probably these fears evolved as a result of threat signaling that snakes have on us. Functionality. Finally, functionality refers to the notion that psychological mechanisms have developed to accomplish an adaptive goal. For example, if there is a preference of visually attractive mate, then it must be fulfilling an adaptive task, in this case getting a more fertile partner and thus more number of offsprings. Empirical testing of evolutionary hypothesis. To empirically test an evolutionary hypothesis in true sense would probably take thousands of years. If the scientists were to manipulate each variable and see its effects on the organisms. Instead, the psychologists and the evolutionists have developed a model for testing such hypotheses that goes in a hierarchy. At the top of this hierarchy is the evolution by selection, and then it gets further divided by the different theories proposed in this direction. Thus, scientists can create model situations based on these theories and observe the developmental and genetic changes in the organisms under the test. From these hypotheses, a number of specific predictions can be made that can directly put under the scanner. Human nature. Human nature is like a vast ocean filled with pearls and mysteries. In history, psychologists have tried to propose some grand theories, that of Sigmund Freud, to define personality, universally in terms of sexual desires and instinctive motives. Or the behaviorist theories focused on the outward manifestations of behaviors. Evolutionary psychologists try to bring in a perspective that highlights the evolution. According to them, personality as a result of evolutionary processes. Psychological mechanisms help organisms to be successfully survive the adaptive problems. Not only they help in mere sustenance of life, they also help them to emerge positively among others that would increase their chance of survival. Let us discuss some of the evolutionary hypotheses about human nature. Need to belong. Hogan in 1982 argues that one of the basic needs of humans is to be accepted by the group. Being ostracized from a group can be extremely damaging and may cause social anxiety. Helping and altruism. The presence of altruism in nature is at first sight confusing, in light of the fact that selfless conduct lessens the probability that an individual will replicate. The possibility that gathering choice may clarify the development of unselfishness was initially proposed by Darwin himself in The Descent of Man and the Selection in Relation to Sex in 1871. The idea of gathering determination has had a disputable history. In developmental science, however, the uncritical great of the species custom went to an unexpected stop in the 1960s because of the work of George C. Williams and George Maynard Smith, and in addition Richard Dawkins. These developmental scholars called attention to that regular choice follows up on the individual, and that it is the individual's wellness, number of posterity and stupendous posterity created contrasted with whatever is left on the populace, that derives advancement. A gathering advantage, example chasing in a pack, that is disadvantageous to the person who may be hurt amid the chase, when it could stay away from the damage by hanging once again from the pack, yet at the same time offer in the riches, can't develop. In the light of the fact that the childish individual will leave, by and large, more posterity and the individuals who join the pack and endure wounds thus. On the off chance that the childishness is inherited, this will eventually bring about the populace comprising altogether of narrow-minded people. Be that as it may, in the 1960s and the 1970s, an other option to the gathering choice hypothesis developed. This was the family choice hypothesis. Because of W. D. Hamilton, kin determination is an occurrence of comprehensiveness, wellness, which depends on the thought that an individual imparts just a large proportion of its qualities to every posterity. Additionally, with every full sip, From a transformative heredity perspective, it is in this way as favorable to help with the childhood of full sibs as it is to deliver and raise one's own particular posterity. The two exercises are developmentally completely proportional. Co-agent reproducing, that is helping one's folk raise sibs if they are full sibs, could in this way develop without the requirement for gathering level determination. This immediately picked up the noticeable quantity among scientists inspired by the development of social conduct. Universal emotions. The pioneer theory of evolution of emotions was proposed by Charles Darwin, wherein he focused on the aggressive expressions of organisms for intra-sexual competition. An evolutionary perspective leads one to view the mind as crowded zoo of evolved, domain-specific programs. Each is functionally specialized for solving a different adaptive problem that arose during hominid evolutionary history, such as face recognition, foraging, mate choice, heart rate regulation, sleep management or predator vigilance, and each is activated by a different set of cues from the environment. But the existence of all these micro programs itself creates an adaptive problem. The problems that are individually designed to solve specific adaptive problems could, if simultaneously activated, deliver outputs that conflict with one another, interfering with or nullifying each other's functional products. For example, sleep and flight from the predator require mutually inconsistent actions, computations, and physiological states. It is difficult to sleep when your heart and mind are racing with fear, and this is no accident. Disastrous consequences would ensue if proprioceptive cues were activating sleep programs at the same time that the sight of a stalking lion was activating ones designed for the predator evasion. To avoid such consequences, the mind must be equipped with superordinate programs that override some programs when others are activated. Example, a program that deactivates sleep program when predator evasion subroutines are activated. Furthermore, many adaptive problems are best solved by the simultaneous activation of many different components of the cognitive architecture, such that each component assumes one of several alternative states. Again, a superordinate program is needed that coordinates these components, snapping each into the right configuration at the right time. Emotions are such programs to behave functionally according to the evolutionary standards. The mind's many sub-programs need to be orchestrated so that their joint produce at any given time is functionally coordinated. Rather than cacophonous and self-defeating, this coordination is accomplished by a set of superordinate programs, the emotions. They are adaptations that have arisen in response to the adaptive problem of mechanism. In this view, the exploration of the statistical structure of ancestral situation and their relationship to the mind's battery of functionally specialized programs is central to the mapping of emotions. This is because the most useful or least harmful deployment of programs at any given time will depend critically on the exact nature of the confronting situation. Paul Ekman in 1972 revolutionized the concept of emotions and proposed an universal theory. He identified 6 basic emotions irrespective of caste, creed of culture that found in each organism, each adding to the survival psychological mechanism. These are happy, sad, fear, anger, surprise and disgust. Limitations. Like all philosophies, evolutionary psychology has also some limitations to it. First, human adaptations are a product of millions of years of hardships, and it is very difficult for us to trace back and state in absolute terms the reasons and explanations it provides. Second, it is only the tip of the iceberg. Scientists have uncovered only a fraction of information in this direction. and there can be many possible unknown triggers that too might confound the result. Third, adaptations are domain specific. The ancestral conditions thousands of years ago was very different from the modern age we live in. It would be therefore risky to generalize the findings of evolutionary hypothesis. Lastly, one phenomena can have different evolutionary hypotheses. Summary: survival, or in simpler words, overcoming the hardships and challenges of the natural habitat we live in, is one of the key aspects that Earth sustains life. The vast ecodiversity as we see today is a result of long, ever continuing process called evolution. Charles Darwin proposed the theory of natural selection in his famous book Origin of Species in 1895. He reasoned that changes and variants that allow an organism to reproduce more would lead to more descendants. Therefore, the descendants would inherit those traits that helped their ancestors to survive. As suggested by him, the evolution of characteristics is determined because of their mating or sexual benefits, rather than mere survival benefits. This is known as sexual selection. Adaptations are the primary products of selective process. It can be defined as the reliably developing structures in an organism, which, because it enmeshes with the current structure of the world, cause the solution to the adaptive problems. Evolutionary psychology involves three key premises: domain specificity, numerousness, and functionality. Adaptations are domain specific, that is, they are evolved to address a particular adaptive problem. For example, in case of food selection, if organisms go by the rule eat everything you see first, it would be maladaptive, as without proper judgment the food can be poisonous and kill the animal. Functionality refers to the notion that psychological mechanisms have developed to accomplish an adaptive goal. Like all philosophies, evolutionary psychology has also some limitations to it. First, human adaptations are a product of millions of years of hardships, and it is very difficult for us to trace back and state in absolute terms the reasons and explanation it provides. Second, it is only the tip of the iceberg. Scientists have uncovered only a fraction of information in this direction, and there can be many possible unknown triggers too that might confound the result.